All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive royal succession crisis that went down over 3,000 years ago. And trust me, this isn't just dusty ancient history. It holds some incredibly sharp lessons for modern leadership, church governance, and yes, even how we parent our kids. When we look at this story from 1 Kings chapter 1, you're going to see that human weakness, especially when facing power, ambition, and crisis, hasn't really changed at all. So are you ready? Let's dig right into the truth behind this historical earthquake.
We've got 5 key areas on the agenda for us today. First, the battle for the throne. Second, the absolute disaster of spoiling a child. Third, the prophet's spiritual courage. Fourth, a spiritual view of power. And finally, divine order. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Battle for the Throne. We're looking at a kingdom on the brink of a total meltdown. To really get this, we need to set the historical stage. David became king at 30, but by 970 BC, this once unstoppable warrior is 70 years old. Historical records tell us he was so incredibly weak and frail that they could cover him in blankets and he still couldn't get warm. And you know what happens when a powerful leader starts fading, right? It instantly triggers a dangerous power vacuum and a massive internal struggle for the crown.
So, while King David is literally fading away, his 4th son, Adonijah, decides to make his move. Adonijah is extremely handsome, and he relies entirely on those superficial looks and worldly political tactics. He gathers chariots, horsemen, and throws a massive secret feast to declare himself king. But guess who didn't make the guest list? His brother Solomon and Nathan the prophet. Adonijah totally ignores God's preordained plan for Solomon to take the throne. This was just a pure, fleshly power grab based entirely on human ambition.
Moving to Section 2, the disaster of indulgent parenting. This really highlights a massive failure in the home.
This specific quote perfectly exposes David's huge disciplinary failure with his son. I mean, on the battlefield, David was an absolute legend, right? But at home, he practiced a completely hands-off, ultra-indulgent parenting style. He never once questioned Adonijah's behavior. He never crossed him or made him feel gloomy. And honestly, that silence and indulgence from a parent, it was the exact catalyst that bred a rebel and almost destroyed the entire kingdom.
When you compare these two parenting styles, it becomes really clear how to avoid indulgent parenting altogether. If we only focus on giving our kids material stuff and constant outward praise, like you see on the left, while desperately avoiding ever making them feel frustrated, we are literally risking raising an arrogant, rebellious generation. Instead, we need the strategies on the right: strict spiritual shaping, grounding the next generation in divine truth, and teaching them obedience. That is what true love actually looks like.
So I really want you to pause and ask yourself, are we making those exact same Adonijah mistakes in our own homes or ministries? David's failure to discipline his son threw a whole nation into chaos. It just goes to show the severe dangers of avoiding those difficult, uncomfortable conversations with the people we love just to keep a fake, superficial peace. We absolutely have to learn from this.
Section 3. The prophet's courage. The power of boldly speaking the truth.
Thankfully, someone in the kingdom had the guts to step up. Look at Nathan's critical choice when facing power here. He didn't just run out into the streets screaming about a conspiracy. No, he used a very strategic, 3-step approach to display incredible spiritual courage. First, he warns Bathsheba. Then she appeals to the king's oath. And finally, Nathan enters the palace, bowing in humility, but firmly questioning if the king had secretly approved this usurpation. This is an absolute masterclass in how to effectively speak truth to power.
And that brings us to the true definition of spiritual courage. Today, so many churches and organizations suffer from this toxic silence, where people just let bad things happen because they're terrified of offending someone. But Nathan's example reminds us that if you truly love your community, you have to stand up and correct deviations from the truth during a crisis. Defending divine truth is vastly more important than keeping up appearances.
Which leads right into Section 4, a spiritual view of power. Grace versus networking.
Ultimately, Adonijah failed because he relied entirely on his flesh. And the crazy thing is, in modern churches and organizations, we fall into this exact same trap all the time. We start thinking that if we just have enough seniority, a massive network, crazy talents, or a bunch of resources, we automatically deserve leadership and influence. We let our resumes dictate our spiritual authority, and we completely forget about God's sovereign calling.
To cure this sickness, we have to apply these modern church power transition principles. We need a massive shift in perspective, moving away from worldly ladder climbing and toward humble submission to God's will. Ministry isn't a political campaign, it's a product of grace. So when power transitions happen, we must absolutely reject self-promotion, drop our egos, and make sure every single decision is grounded in prayer and truth, not office politics.
Finally, Section 5, Divine Order, Restoring the Kingdom.
Because Nathan courageously spoke up, David finally snaps out of his lethargy. And once his spirit is awake, his actions are lightning fast and decisive. He swears an oath, summons the core spiritual leaders, puts Solomon on the royal mule, anoints him, and blows the ram's horn. Just like that, David's swift actions completely shattered Adonijah's illegitimate party. It proves an eternal truth. Human plotting and fleshly ambition will always, always fail against divine order.
40 years. That is how long Solomon would go on to reign over Israel following this incredibly successful crisis management and power transition. In fact, historians often compare this glorious golden era of peace to the magnificent reign of King Mu of Zhou in ancient China.
And when Adonijah's plot collapsed and he ran in terror to grab the horns of the altar, Solomon said this to him. This quote beautifully models exactly how true divine governance works. Solomon didn't take the opportunity to enact bloody revenge. Instead, he perfectly balanced absolute justice with remarkable grace, giving his brother a chance to repent, while firmly establishing the divine order for his new dynasty.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative question. Are you building your life on fleshly ambition, or are you submitting to God's divine order? The trajectory of history shows us that human plotting always falls apart. So, whether it's in your parenting, your career, or your faith community, are you fighting for control based on your own desires, or are you willing to surrender your ego to God's ultimate authority? I hope this 3,000-year-old history serves as a powerful reminder for you today. See you next time.